Hello, so for our first Grasshopper tutorial, we're going to try to keep this kind of simple. Here I just have my regular Rhino window open. I double clicked on the perspective mode. I'm going to change my units. I'm going to type in units. And I'm going to change them into inches, feet in inches, and that's all fine. Hit OK. And yes, okay. So first thing I'm going to do is type in Grasshopper. Grasshopper is already loaded into Rhino 5 and 6, so you should just be able to type it in and it'll pop right up. Now, these two windows impact each other, so there's some communication happening between the two. So I want to try to see both at once, so I'm going to kind of move them aside so they can share the screen. And actually, I'm going to just cancel out of this because I'm not going to need it at the moment. So I'm just going to X out of that properties bar. All right. So in this case, I want to make something that, a series of circles that'll get bigger or smaller in the relation to a point. So to start out with, I'm going to draw a circle in this window. So I'm just going to get my circle tool. It can go anywhere. And I'll make it, I don't know, 2 inches big-ish, 4 inches big-ish, like that. Okay. So in order for Grasshopper to read an object that's in Rhino, I need to tell it to find it. So over here, I'm going to type in curve. And sorry, when I did that, I just double clicked on the background and then I can type. So similar to how you type in Rhino. So curve. And these ones that have that kind of black hexagon around them means that they represent something that is in the real space. So I'm going to right click on this little bubble and say set one curve. And then I'm going to select my circle. That orange went away. When the orange is there, it means that it's not yet set. When it's gray like this, it means it knows where it is, it's working. If it turns red, it means that it doesn't know where it is, it's lost it. So let's say I were to delete this, it goes back to orange. That's because it can no longer find it. I guess red really means broken. You'll see something red in a little bit. So let me remake my circle. Again, I'm not too concerned with how big it is, about that big. Okay, set one curve and select it. All right, so in order to get an array of these, I'm going to double click on here and type in a command called rectangular array. And it's this guy right here, rectangular array. Click on that. So the first thing, if I hover over here, it tells me what it's looking for. So it's looking for a base geometry. My base geometry is going to be my curve. In order to connect them, I just click down, hold, and then until it hits the other one, and then I let go. And now you can see I have a whole bunch of these. It's arrayed them. Let's say I want to disconnect it. I can, ooh, how do I disconnect again? I think I just right click on it. Yeah, so if I right click on it, I can hit disconnect curve and I can select which one I'm disconnecting. So I can do that. Let's say I had two curves I wanted to do this to, so I'm going to make another curve over here. I could set another curve, so double click here, type in curve, set one curve, select the other one. If I want them both to go in there, I just hold them both. Oh, sorry, I hold that one and then I hold shift and I do the other one, and now it's doing the same thing to both of those. But we just want to focus on one, so I'll delete this. Okay. So I want to be able to control how many of these there are and what the spacing is. So if I look over here, cell is the rectangular array cell, so that's how far apart it is. So I want to change how far apart these circles are from each other. So this is another instance where I'm going to bring in something from Rhino into here. So I'm going to type in rectangle. And again, I have that little thing with the black octagon. I'm going to put that into here. And then you see how this all went away and this all turned orange because it's waiting on this input. It's like, I don't have this input, so I can't do this. So I'm going to right click on here and say set one rectangle. I'm going to go to my midpoint and I can get that. I'm going to turn off my grid snap. Okay, so if you don't have your center thing clicked, you can click on that. If you hover towards the edge of your circle, that'll give you the center. And then I'm going to just estimate maybe like that far apart. Nope, not far apart enough. So I'm going to set it again. Right click on it, set one rectangle. I'm going to come back to the center, give it a little more space. If I hold shift, it'll do a square. So how about that? Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I want to be able to have more of these so that I can see more of a difference between them when I go through extruding. So I'm going to use something called a number slider that'll let me toggle how many of them it's arraying. So I'm going to double click on here and type in slide. And I want number slider. By default, number slider goes from 0 up to 1. I wanted to do a lot more than that. So I'm going to double click on here. And over here, I'm going to change my minimum. My minimum is fine, actually. 0 is fine. I'm going to make my maximum here 50. And click OK. And then I also want to change this to be integers. I don't want to have all those like in between numbers. And hit OK. So x and y are the number of elements in the array in the x direction and the number in the y direction. I'm going to do a square for this to keep things simple. So I'm going to connect this into both my x and my y. And then as I draw this up, you'll see it's creating more circles. So it's doing like a 50 by 50 as the maximum size, which is pretty big. So I'm going to keep it around like, I don't know, 10, 15, somewhere around there. So I'll keep it around 15 for now, but that's something we can always change later. All right, now that I have this set up, the next thing I want to think about is how am I going to get them to extrude to different distances? So to begin with, there isn't a command called extrude, so I just do extrude. And what it wants is, if I hover over it, a base. So it's a profile curve or surface, and it wants an extrusion direction. Notice it doesn't say a number, it says a vector. That's really important in Grasshopper. It never just wants to know the distance, it wants to know the exact direction that things are moving. So to begin with, I'm going to take my geometry from here. This is the output. So inputs, outputs. The output it's outputting is the geometry. So that's all those curves. It's also outputting, this explains how they've moved. But we won't worry about that right now. So what I want is geometry. So I'm going to put that into the base. Notice it's orange. It still needs that vector. So if I double click on my background and type in vector, I could either draw in a vector, but I'm going to do a vector XYZ is the one I want, and that'll let me compose a vector. So by default, it's giving me 0 for all of these. So if I were to plug this in, you'll notice this turns red. And I say how it turns red, it's broken. It's like, okay, something's not working here. So I go to this little thing. It says curve could not be extruded. The reason the curve cannot be extruded is because the vector is defined as 0, 0, 0. There's nowhere for it to go. If I were to give it, for example, if I were to put in a number, so if I just did, just be able to do normal number, play numbers. Yeah, so if I double click on here, or if I right click, set one number. No, what did I do? Set number, and if I made this like 5, commit changes. The other thing I like to do, I like to change the name up here from number to 5 so I remember what I put in here. If I were to plug that into my Z direction, I can see they've all extruded 5. They've all extruded evenly. If I were to do that in all 3 directions, it's going to extrude out that way. If I disconnect this one, then it's only in 2 directions. You get the point. So I'm going to disconnect all of these. Disconnect, disconnect. So that's helpful, but we want to vary how far it's going to extrude. So to do that, we need to use a little bit of math, and we're going to use a point. So I'm going to draw a point in Revit, or in Rhino. So I'm just going to draw a point out here, wherever, doesn't matter. Okay, great. Here's my 1 point. I need to bring it into Grasshopper. So I'm going to double click on here, type in point, right click on here, click set 1 point, select my point. Okay, now that's selected. Now I'm going to extrude these based on their distance from this point. So the closer that these are to this point, the less it will extrude. The farther away it is, the more they will extrude. So to figure that out, I need to use a command called distance. I'm going to move this stuff over a little bit, just like click and hold drag to move those over. So if this is the point I put in, I now want to measure distance. So I'm going to type in dist distance. Okay, what does the distance command want? It wants point A and point B. It doesn't want to measure between a geometry, right? I have a geometry here and a point. So I could plug that into there and see how it's red. Data conversion failed from curve to point. It's saying I can't measure between the curve and the point. I want just a point and a point. So I first need to find what the closest point is on this geometry to this other point. So luckily there's a thing that does that. So if I type in here and type in closest, I'm just going to type in closest. You can see there's curve closest point, finds the closest point on a curve. Great. So I'm going to click on that. What that wants is it wants my curve and it wants the point that I am checking with. So the point I'm checking with is the one I drew, same as this. Plug that in. And then the curve I want to check against is this one. So I put that in there. So if you look in green, it's now highlighted what the closest point on these curves is to that point. If I were to move it, so if I move that over here, did that actually move? That did not move. What did I do with that? Oh, I made curves. Okay. So I'm going to type in move from here to here. You'll notice that that point shifted. If I were to move it again, I could even move it like in the middle of these. Now you'll notice all those green points are shifting towards that point. So I'm going to move it back out of here. Just keep things simple. All right. So now I'm going to take the point, so that green point here, and that's what I'm going to measure against, find out what that distance is. So based on that distance, I'm going to use that distance as my z now. So you'll notice that these are all responding in height to that point. And if I move that point, so type in M, enter, move it right in the middle, now it has a depression in the middle of here. Now, if you don't like this relationship, there are lots of different math things you can do to change it. So if I'm like, okay, I like this, but I think they're too tall, I could do, and so this is a distance between A and B. So I think I can do like divided by division. So I could do division, and I could do like, I want to take this distance, but I want to divide it by 2. So I could put in a number. Set number 2, commit changes. And I could right click on here and change this to 2 just so I don't forget. If I put that in there and now I plug this into there, you'll notice it's all half as much. So you can do all sorts of things. There's all kinds of maths. So if you look over here and I go over the maths, these are all, you can add things, you can get the square root of things, all these kinds of things. So you'll find at different times that you'll need that difference. But for now, let's just keep it divided by 2. Okay. So last thing, hang on. Excuse me. Okay, so last thing. I want this to be real geometry within Rhino. So I don't want to, when it's red, it means that it's like, or green, it's selected. But this, if I were to turn off Grasshopper for a second, this would all go away. It would no longer exist. But I want to be able to keep it. So in order to be able to keep it, actually before I do that, maybe we want more of these. We want more of these. So if I move my number slider, you can see like it keeps growing. I don't like that many, that looks better. Okay, great. So that's now at 24 over here, my number slider. So what's great about this is like you can keep moving the point, you can keep experimenting with that. This is still changing, but if I want to freeze it in place and keep it in Rhino for drawing or to do something with it, I'm going to do something called bake. So if I double click and type in bake, oh, nope, I'm wrong. Okay, sorry. If I right click on here and go to bake, see where the little egg is? It's going to essentially make that like a solid real thing. So I can tell it, I can group it if I want to. I only have a default layer, so it might be nice to have more than have this on a different layer. I can set the layer here. So let me hit cancel a second, come back over here into Rhino, type in layer. I'm going to add a new layer and call this bake one. Make another layer and call it bake 2. You'll see why in a second. And on these layers, I'm going to make bake 1 green, bake 2 pink, whatever. Okay, great. So this is my bake 1. So I'm going to go back over into Grasshopper, right click on here, hit bake. I'm going to tell it to go into my bake 1 layer and hit OK. So now I can right click on bake 1, select objects, and I can move them out of the way. And so now I have this saved. I'm going to put this into shaded. You can see I have this great little display going on over here. So I want to make another version. So I'm going to make my second version, and to do that, I'm going to move that point. So going back to the point over here, I'm going to select it, type in M for move, and I'm going to move it over outside over here. Okay, and this will be my second version. So now I'm going to go back over to here, right click on my extrude, hit bake, and I'm going to go on to bake 2 and hit OK. Okay, great. And so now I have that second one. I can also move that out of the way if I want to. If I just right click on here, select objects, I can move it. I don't have to move it. I could always turn them on and off. The nice thing about leaving them in the same place is then I could compare them more easily. So maybe that would have been a smarter thing to do. Okay, when I am done with this, I want to make sure to save the Grasshopper file as well as my Rhino file. So I go File, Save Document, and I like to try to give them a similar name so I don't totally forget. So again, find somewhere you'll be able to find it. So this is tutorial script. And I'm going to hit save. And then this one, I'm going to do save as tutorial. And again, I want them in the same folder. So now if I close out of this, and I close out of this file, I can close everything else. I don't care about this. Okay, so when I come back to open up my Rhino file, it's thinking about it. You'll notice that the Grasshopper stuff is not automatically there, right? Like I have the 2 things that were baked are still here, but that original, that red piece is no longer there. In order to bring that in, I need to type in Grasshopper again. And then I'm going to need to load that file. So it saves the most recent ones, so I can just click on that, or I could always go File, Open Document, and navigate to where I saved it, Open. And then you'll see it reappears, and I'm able to keep working with both files. But you need to make sure to always save both and know where both are. So for your tutorial, please just upload both your Grasshopper script and your Rhino 6 or Rhino 5 model. And actually, sorry, change of mind. Okay, just upload a screenshot of this. Okay, so if you get a screenshot of this whole thing and upload it to Tumblr, that would be perfect. Thank you so much.